Hi everybody, welcome to my podcast, Bring It On. And tonight I'm very happy because I have an author of the book called The Demon of Brownsville Road with me, Mr. Bob Cranmer. And I'm very happy to have you on the show, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to always happy to have an opportunity to talk about this story and the book.
Yeah, because, like we said earlier, the book jumped at me. I was in Savannah, and I just bought the book, and I wrote it, and I read the whole thing in 2 days, and I even got, late to the investigation, sir, because of you, because I was so into the story, because the story is incredible. To me, it's the best book I've read in a long, long, long time, and a lot of people have been asking me, how do you compare it to Amityville Horror House? I said it's totally different because in the Amityville Horror House, a lot of stuff happened, but they just leave, after 31 days. They just left the place but you, it's totally the opposite. You stayed up there and you fought. And it's a story of not only, the paranormal activity that was happening inside the house. It was a story of courage and faith and never give up. And, believing in yourself and believing in power of God. To me, that was amazing. So your book was absolutely amazing. And we want to start by the first question. You were, you're a man, you were raised, your parents were in the army, right?
My father, yes.
And so and then you moved to, because you were born, and I think the house itself, you saw it when you were young, you passed in front of the house, and you always felt compelled to go back to the house, almost as if it was calling for you, right?
Well, that's what I was told after the fact when we were working with some folks on the exorcism or the expulsion of the demon from the house, that this battle that I went through in some way, and I certainly don't claim to understand how all this works, but there was some preordained plan that drew me to the house from the time I was a young child, and that this supernatural battle that took place that I was involved with was in some way, and again, not understanding how this stuff works, had been planned by supernatural forces, by God, and that it took place.
And it happened. You bought the house in 1988, right?
Yes.
And the activity didn't start right away. It took a few years before it really started happening.
Well, I mean, the paranormal activity started weeks after we moved in. It seemed innocent enough or non-threatening. It was a curiosity. It wasn't long after my wife and I came to the conclusion that, we lived in a haunted house, and we really weren't sure what that meant. Neither one of us ever experienced, anything like that prior to moving into the house. But again, it didn't seem to be threatening. It seemed to be a curiosity and something that we could coexist with. And it seemed that we did for a number of years, but at the same time, it was as an evil entity surreptitiously going about its work, setting up, this attack on my family to expel us from the house, so to speak. And eventually, all hell broke loose years later, and the battle ensued. Then it dropped its mask of discreetness, so to speak, and it became very much, in your face. There was no question. It was a one-on-one, first-person experience that took place for several years, and it was almost like living with the invisible man in the house.
Yeah, no kidding. Because, as a paranormal investigator, that's what we're trying to always, document paranormal activity. And but at the same time, there's a big question in our mind. What would happen? What would I do if it happened in my home with my kids? Would I still have would I interact with it the same way I do during an investigation? Because when you do a paranormal investigation, you do it, then you go home, right? But the owners of the house that you did the investigation, they get to stay. So that's very important to stay professional and not provoke or anything, get things worse for the owner of the house. But as a paranormal investigator, you almost have that feeling inside of you like, my God, what would I do? And reading your book, it made me question everything, question everything, my beliefs, my, would I be strong enough to do what you did and fight and stay? Maybe just me, I would stay, but my family involved, I don't know. I really, really don't know. And I don't think anybody can say for sure, I will, until they've experienced that. And, when you look back, sir, after a few years later, now that it's gone, will you stay and fight? If you could go back in time, would you still do the same thing?
Well, there's no question that I would. Would I keep my family in the house with me at the same time, or would I keep my children in the house? I don't think so. No. I did for a reason at that point. I didn't want to give this thing an inch. I wanted to maintain ownership of the house, that this was our house and we would not leave. But the damage that it caused, I don't know long-term damage, but the psychological damage that it caused on two of my children, which is documented in the book, as well as my grandson. I don't want to say that was irresponsible, but I think that was a little reckless on my part.
Yeah, maybe, looking back, it seems reckless, but at the same time, when you're living through this, it's day to day. And you also have your day job, you're going to work, you come back home, you have to sleep, so you're not into it 24/7, 365, when you're at work, and then you come back home, you're like, oh my God, it's still going on. And then there were short breaks also during that period, it was on and off. It was very sneaky, right?
Yeah, and there were times when I really didn't want to leave my office to go home because I knew what I faced when I went home. I knew this thing would be waiting for me for a time, so many months. We would have almost a nightly duel, and it was just surreal. I mean, I'm talking about having these tests of will with a supernatural being. And, you try to relate that to people or tell people what you experience, and they look at you like you're crazy. But it happened. This whole thing happened. It's true. I also, a point I think I want to make is that, I think there is a big difference between a ghost that haunts a house or a restaurant or a hotel, and you hear the stories all the time of, someone looking for their lost, jilted lover or some such thing. I think, disembodied spirits exist, and for whatever reason, maybe it's purgatory, they're separated from their destination for a period of time, period of years. But what we were dealing with was not a ghost. This was evil. This was a demon, and there's a big difference between the two. So I don't want everyone thinking that, if they're dealing with some kind of ghost, that they're going to have the same type of experience that we had. And even in the case with us, as I understand it and what I've learned about this whole subject over the years, that this demon was very powerful. To be able to resist the way it did for as long as it did, it was a powerful entity, and I think it was somewhat uncommon.
Oh my goodness, you're right, because not to spoil the book for people who haven't read it, but everything happened. Everything you hear or you see in every horror story, it was a nonstop. It started like you said, with doors moving and stuff like that. But then all of a sudden, it turned into, the rosary beds being broken. And how about that little closet where always twisted around the light? It seemed to be a very, I think that's where you had to dig the hole in the wall and find all these things. It seemed to be a very active place in the house, right?
Yeah, that was a place, and again, that's somewhat in the middle of the story, but even though this was a supernatural spirit, they aren't omnipresent. They can't be two places at one time, And this thing, it was in the house all the time. It wasn't always apparent. It wasn't always up to its mischief or its attacks on us. So at times it would appear, and then for a week or so it wouldn't appear. And I realized that it had to be somewhere in the house during what we came to understand as like downtime. And this space that's pretty much directly in the center of the house, underneath the big oak staircase, is where this thing hung out. And we came to understand that when we broke into the space, and after we did break into the space, that's when it all hell really broke loose. We broke into its private place, but at that point in time, I realized there were things that we could do to it that would make its existence as miserable as it was trying to make ours. And then it just became, a battle of determination.
Oh, it did. And, all the things that you did to try to, to fight it, like putting the movie Passion of the Christ, in repeat, 24/7 inside the Blue Room, because that's the room, where I think your son was living when you moved in the house, and he started, pretty quickly to show signs of not being the same kid that he was before you moved in the house. And actually, if I remember correctly, that was the first signs that something was wrong, and that put a green light to you, like, oh my God, there's something. It's not just Casper the Friendly Ghost. No, it's something more to it than that, because it affected your son, very very quickly in the Blue Room, right?
Well, I mean, when you can imagine a 3-year-old boy,
my God,
a 3-year-old boy standing up to his father and a Catholic priest who was blessing the house, and he stood defiantly in front of the door to his room. And not in a nice way. And excuse me, I have the window open here.
No problem.
and defiantly refusing us entrance to the room so the priest could bless the room with holy water. And again, a 3-year-old boy. What was causing him to do that was just amazing. And yes, it did in a way start to really affect him from the very weeks that we moved into the house.
Exactly. And Bernie on Facebook asking you, how long was the battle took place? How long did you fight it?
Well, I would say it really began in earnest in late 2003. I would say in December, November, December of 2003, and the final conclusion, the concluding mass was in February of 2006. So that's just a little over 2 years.
So 2 years, but 2 years is, it's long. It's a long battle, because sometimes, it lasts for a week or two. In 2 years, it's, and it took a toll on you. Took a toll on you in a, physical and psychological way. Because in the book, you're like I said, it's a battle of will, it's a battle of fate, and a battle of I think it shows your personality. You're a guy that never gives up, and has a lot of faith, and your faith, kept you strong through the struggle. But at the same time, there were times where you felt very, very down, and you were able. I think the reason the book was awesome to me is the fact that you were not afraid to ask for help, and you were not afraid to team up with people. Father Ron, tell me more about him, because in the book we get attached to him, because he was incredible, just talking to you on the phone almost every night, giving you good advices. And, do you recognize, are you still good friends with him after all these years? Or are you...
In fact, next month on the Sci-Fi Channel, the show Perelman Witness will be doing an episode on this story. An hour-long episode, and both myself, my wife, Father Ron is interviewed, and 2 of my children. So if you're familiar with that show,
but so
basically just interviews of the people that were involved, along with a dramatization of what took place. So I'm looking forward. They've been doing a lot of work to document it, working on it for months now. So
it's incredible. You want to know something? Because today is a day off, and I was watching Perelman Witness on television, and actually I was thinking about the podcast of tonight. I was like, my God, all these shows have been very good, but this wouldn't be half as good as if they put your story on Perelman Witness. And tonight you're telling me that it's going to be on. So it's weird because I thought of it exactly today, watching one of the Perelman Witness show here in Canada. We got it on the Space Channel. In the U.S., I think it's on Travel or Sci-Fi. I'm not sure, but Sci-Fi, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, but here in Canada, we got it Space Channel. But at the same time, I'm looking forward to it. Here, we're probably going to get it like a year after they show it in the U.S., but, I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it'll be, it's going to be shown in the United Kingdom and I guess North America, or at least the United States, next month. And I'm not a big I'm not a big watcher of the paranormal type programs, but I have watched Paranormal Witness, obviously, after they contacted me to talk about doing a show, and I was very impressed. I mean, there's no hype. It's not sensationalized. They just do the interviews and reenact it. And of all the shows, I'm happy that this one is going to depict the story.
Yeah, it does depict good stories because I've had a chance to investigate some of the places that they did the show, like the Haunted Victorian Mansion in Gardner, Massachusetts, and talking with the owners of the house and seeing the show, like you said, it's the same story. It's not dramatized. It's the same story. They keep it to the story, and that's good. And I think that's the reason why the show is still going on after 4 years, is that, these days with Twitter and Facebook and social media, I don't think you can do anything fake anymore without, being called out very quickly, right? Because everything is out there, on Twitter, on Facebook, and there's no way to, to do it. I don't think, not in 2014.
The one thing I want to emphasize about this story, because I've become, when you kind of put a story as personal as this out there, for people to read and to criticize or comment on. I've read people that are frustrated because they say that, well, all I want is a scary book. I want a book that scares me, and this tells me much more information about the family than I ever wanted to know. And this guy just likes to talk about himself. Well, the big question, if someone sits down and really reads the book and comprehends it, as I always get, is how in the world why did you stay there? And two, how could you ever have the courage to do that? I mean, certainly I'm not some kind of a fool, but I do have faith, and I understood what my faith stood for, and I took a large chunk of the first part of the book to explain my faith and who I am, so that once people get into the book, they can understand what motivated me and maintained me and my family through this 2-year battle. And if someone's just looking for some paranormal book to scare me to death, this isn't it. This is a story of faith. And it's a story of the reality of evil and the reality of good, and how good can, in fact, overcome evil, and that this all happens. So that's I somewhat frustrated as I read reviews of the book, and then at the same time I read other folks that see it just the way you've depicted it, as a detailed account of a struggle of a family, fighting for their lives, really.
Exactly. That's how I see it. But, at the same time, the critics of books, I don't think they ever had a good critique of a book ever anyway. But when you look at your Facebook page or, people come up with great, review of the book. And, it's very inspirational because, to not only for me as a paranormal investigator, but for anybody, even if they're not interested in the paranormal, because it's like you said, it's a battle of fate. And it's, of will and never give up attitude. And to me, it's probably the best example of, standing up and say, you know what, I'm not, this is my home. You're not taking it from me and you're not going to scare me away. Because there were times in the book, you explained, you were feeling very, almost to the point of giving up. There was one point I remember in the book where you said, probably just before you called the PRS team to Adam to come in, that was the low point for you because you were losing the battle. That was the point where the stench was awful, like every night. The third floor, the second floor, almost impossible to sleep there anymore. And you were, feeling like you were losing the battle, but You stood up again, finding a way. What can I do? And that's what I love about what you did, is that you're always trying to find out a way to fight it. It's not working. We'll find another way.
Well, you obviously read the book. And, I think, too, some people who read it and understand that determination and that will to keep moving forward. Some people may be turned off by that. Some people, that may threaten them. It may threaten who they are, and they didn't like it. So again, this story goes much deeper than just your average, okay, this house is haunted and we were scared and the people tried to, talk to this priest or that and nothing happened and nothing worked and they ran away. That's not what this story is about. And, the bottom line is, as I've explained at different points of the book, when you look at evil in the world, you look at what's happening every day on the news and the evil, in the Middle East and in Iraq and in Syria and other places, this unbridled evil, that evil goes beyond, evil intentions of people, that evil is an outside force that works on individuals to make them do very evil things. And, our story and the way it's depicted, and I think even from the first pages when it talks about the killing of the children and the mother in the front yard of the house, it kind of starts with that and the book ends with that. That was some pretty horrific stuff, and I think very much accounts for then what took place in the house years later.
Exactly. We had Glenn Williams on Twitter saying that not too many people will be able to make it through an actual demonic infestation, because that's how it started. It was at the point not only infestation, but it was the fact that it might have drove the other families that moved there before, because it was almost impossible, to be able to fight this thing and to find their courage. And what do you think was a turning point for you to actually say to yourself, okay, I'm actually finding something demonic? What was there was a question on Twitter from my friend Christopher in Oklahoma, Bigfoot hunting, great guy, and actually asking you, Mr. Cranmer, what was the turning point to make you go like, oh my God, this is actually more than just like you said before?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I did experiment for a while to find out how it would react, and I think the first point that I came to when I first realized that this thing, and again, I wasn't Catholic at the time, but when it started to pull back from or demonstrate that rosary beads and holy type artifacts upset it. It didn't like it. When I first attached rosary beads to the light in the closet, and it went to great lengths to remove those rosary beads and move them away from the light, I then started to realize that this thing did not like representations of holy objects. And then further, as we went on, I mean, it became very clear, when it would actually break rosary beads apart, and it would bend crucifixes in half and throw them on the floor. It made no pretense that it really had a revulsion towards the cross of Jesus Christ.
It did. It was kind of like, not provoking it, but it was making things worse. But at the same time, it was the way you could, try to fight it off. That was the best way that you could try to show to it. I'm not afraid.
And it would just kind of demonstrate its own contempt for those objects. And then when we further would have Mass in the house, the next day, always after Mass, it would have what I refer to as like temper tantrums, where it would, go through the house and move furniture and move pictures and turn things upside down on the walls and, remove crucifixes from the walls and move pictures from the wall. It was crazy. It would take pictures of the kids and throw them on the floor. It liked to take the wedding picture of my wife and I and take it off the wall and put it on the floor. So any representation of something holy or good, of family, it did not like.
He even stopped the movie from playing. I remember at one point in the book, he said that the DVD was lying on the floor.
Oh, many times, yeah. It would turn it off. It would either turn the TV off, it would turn the player off, or in some cases, it would take the DVD out of the player. I guess it took a while to figure out how to do that, but it did. That's
absolutely incredible. And I was thinking about it, but as you have 4 kids, you have your daughter with a child. At one point, did you ever feel like overwhelmed, like I can't do it? And what was the lowest point? We talked about it earlier, but what was to you personally, the time where you were at the most vulnerable during this battle?
Well, I would say it was halfway through. I think you alluded to it. It was probably Christmas time of 2004. We had been involved in the battle for over a year. I had been told early on that in a year we would know if we were making progress, and a year had gone by, and things were worse. We weren't making any progress, and discord and disharmony in the family, not only between my wife and I and our children, but between my wife and I as well. Everyone was at each other's throats. You had all this crazy stuff going on in the house, and that was also when the blood started to appear on the walls. So by that time, I just felt this is just absolutely insane, and I did basically come to the point where I was going to give up. Now, ultimately, though, we didn't, and we found a renewed strength to continue, and got up off the mat and went back at it.
Exactly. It's kind of like in a boxing match. You're facing an opponent that no matter how much you try to put him down, you can't. But instead of going in the corner and say, throw the white towel, you're like, no, I'm going to find a new way to be able to beat this guy. I'm going to find a way to beat it. And you did. And, but the fact that you were not afraid to surround yourself with good people. And how about Adam Blay? It came out with Ryan Buell and his team. And, I think that the ones that convinced you to dig a hole in the closet, and that's where you found all these things, dating back to the foundation of the house in the late 1800s or the beginning of 1900s, right?
Yes.
In
1909.
For those who haven't read the book, tell me more about that part of the book where you actually dig a hole inside the wall. Was it Adam or Ryan who went out there and found all this stuff?
Well, when they came the first time, there was I guess a psychic or a mystic from Gettysburg who they had been dealing with, and she initially was going to come with them and accompany the team there, But then at the last minute, she begged off and said, no, I don't want to go near this house. The more I, connect with it, so to speak, the more afraid I become. This is a bad place, and you guys need to be very careful if you go at all. But if you do, one thing you need to do is find there is a void, a space in the center of the house where this thing goes, and you have to access that space. So one of the first things they asked me when they arrived was that if I knew of any space like that, and obviously I did, and I often wondered about it myself, and they said, we have to access it, which was not an easy thing to do. We actually had to, I had to cut through the wall and cut a space big enough that you could get in to this void. And yes, Ryan and Adam Bly both went into the space with, respirators and headlamps and spent a good hour in this space finding different things that were in there. That however they got in there over the years, they were there, and some very interesting things that this demonic force, for whatever reason, took into this space.
It's incredible. They even found a Lego block from your
book,
son.
Obviously.
Yeah, a Lego block from one of your sons, and old pictures, with weird stuff written in the back, and something dating back from probably when they built the house.
Yeah, I mean there was a whole number of symbolic things, seemed to be symbolic, different playing cards. There was a big piece of amber in the space, a large piece of amber, almost the size of a golf ball. And as I researched amber for really thousands of years, amber was used in some way to ward off evil spirits. And why or how that got in there, who knows? But I guess the most disturbing thing though was the Lego toy, the piece from my son's Lego set that got into this space that was completely sealed up. I mean, this space was inaccessible, no cracks even into it. It was completely sealed off, and how a solid object is, can materialize or go through a solid wall is beyond me, but it was in there nonetheless with this other material.
My goodness. And at that point, that's, that was a turning point in the fight, because it's as if, you were able to invade its space, and now is not able to hide anymore, right?
That's it. And it really threw a temper tantrum then. And when I say temper tantrum, I'm not talking about a child, but, its activity increased significantly then. And I think it was somewhat frustrated that everything that it tried, and obviously these things have rules that they have to operate under. If they could have killed us, and it could have killed us, I'm sure, had it been permitted to, but there's some type of code or rules that these things operate under, and everything that it was doing to terrify us, to attack us psychologically, we were persevering, and we were taking it, and we continued on with the battle, and at the same time realizing what we could do, as I said before, to make its existence just as miserable as it was making ours.
Exactly. And we have Laurie on Twitter asking you about why do you think that the demonic infestation occurred inside the house? And reading the book, I know that it had something to do with, what happened in the early 1900s, right? When the former owner of the house was performing absolutely, I would say disgusting things, and abortions inside the house. I don't want to give away the whole book right now, but I mean, there were a lot of stuff going on inside the house back before you moved in.
Well, I think initially it probably goes back to, the massacre that took place in the late 1700s during the Northwest Indian War, it was called, and you had a mother and her 3 children were massacred by American Indians, and eventually they were buried right there in what became the front yard of the house, years later when the house was built, over 100 years later. And I think that evil that was associated with that act, which was a very uncommon thing at that point in time for American Indians to do. I mean, they were very ruthless with white men, as white men were ruthless with them. But women and children were generally never killed. They were taken, they were ransomed, they were kept as members of the tribe, and rarely were women and children killed like that. So it was definitely an act of terror, and we believe that evil that was associated with that act stayed on the land and eventually infiltrated the house that was built, and thus caused a number of very evil things to happen. And I think when we looked at this case from beginning to end, the whole thing was always centered around hurting children. Whether it was the children that were killed in the front yard, or later on when the house was rented out to an illicit or illegal abortion operation, and we hesitated to get into the whole debate over abortion because so many people think that there's nothing wrong with it. I just reported what happened, and that this house was used during the Depression as a discreet place for late-term abortions. There was a lot of death, a lot of blood, and whatever people think of it personally, it was still death, and it was a horrific thing that took place. And then later on, my own children. It attacked my children. It attacked my grandson, and this evil entity, which later I feel revealed itself to be a demon called Moloch, which is in the Bible and goes back to the early days of the Israelites and so on. And that demon, that god, was dedicated to the practice of sacrificing children to it. So it all makes sense, and it's all about killing and hurting children.
My goodness, that's incredible. Like my friend Glenn says on Twitter, knowing the enemy is after battle, right? And when the more information you were getting about the house and about what happened there, what was helping you to at least have a good guess of what you were dealing with? Because the worst part is finding an unknown enemy and have no grounds to base yourself on. What am I facing? But the more you digged up into the history of the house and what happened, it gave you, grounds to, to battle and be able to, but at the same time, that it's not the spirit of one of these people, because it's too much, it's too strong, to just be the spirit of somebody. It has to be something stronger. And, but at least, knowing the history, they give you a sense of being able to be confronted with more strength, or the knowledge of what happened. Did it help you in the fight?
Well, I think my training, and I think a lot, and again, why I detail, my background as a military officer, as a military intelligence officer. The role of a military intelligence officer in battle is to get and understand and know as much about the enemy as possible during the battle or before the battle. So it only stands to reason that I had the inquisitive mind and the understanding, and I understood that the more we knew about the enemy, the more effective we could be in combating it. And that's why I constantly sought out the history of the house and everything I could learn, not only about what took place there and this evil and what the evil was and how it operated and what it could do and what it couldn't do. As a support, it certainly made the battle more plausible plausible or I don't want to say easier. Well, yeah, easier. I mean, certainly when you understand your opponent better, you can fight it more effectively, and that's what we did. And again, my background, I think, was all part of the preparation. That ultimately this battle had to take place, and I believe it was all for a purpose. I think this story is just beginning to spread, and it's going to, I think, change many minds on the existence of the supernatural and the existence of pure evil.
You know what? We have to take a 5-minute break, but we'll be back. And Mr. Cranmer, I get so much questions on Twitter right now that it's incredible. You know, it's I do my podcast. I've been doing it for a long time, and this is by far the most interesting, and also the one that had me almost sleepless last night, just thinking about all the questions I had. And I said, no, I'm not going to write down any questions. I'm going to let it flow, because sometimes when you prepare yourself for a podcast and the questions are all lined up, that you end up going in a different direction. And I'd rather, let the podcast take a direction by itself. And that's exactly what's happening right now. And at the same time, I got a lot more stuff that I want to talk about. So just a 5-minute break, and we'll be back. So everybody listening to us, just come back in 5 minutes. We'll be back.